Okay, so to wrap up talking about stereotypes before we move on to talking about discrimination and prejudice, I want to move to one of the more influential ways of thinking about stereotype content that social psychologists have come up with. And this is something that Susan Fiske and her colleagues have sort of developed over the years. About 20 years ago, they started talking about this, but they call it the stereotype content model, or the SCM. So the idea behind this is to try to make stereotypes between different groups comparable in some way. So kind of the unique thing about stereotypes is that they're all kind of different and unique, specific to different groups, right? But what the stereotype content model does is try to boil them down to their most basic dimensions. And what Fiske and her colleagues say are the most basic dimensions of stereotypes are these two: warmth and competence. So by warmth, what they mean is, are the groups well-intentioned toward me? Are they friendly? Do they have positive intentions toward us or not? So the way that they measure warmth is they ask people, about different groups, and they say, is that group warm? Are members of that group friendly? Are they well-intentioned, trustworthy, good-natured, and sincere? So that is kind of the primary dimension. The other dimension is competence. Are those members of those groups capable of carrying out those intentions? So are they competent, capable, efficient, intelligent, skillful, and confident? So Fiske, Cuddy, Glick, and Zhu aren't saying necessarily that these are the absolute only things that stereotypes are comprised of, but they are saying that these are the main, simple, fundamental dimensions on which we judge other people. And they kind of developed some of this thinking from a standpoint of thinking about, again, evolutionary psychology and how we've developed. They emphasize that warmth seems to be the primary dimension for a number of reasons, perhaps because in our ancestral environment, think about, you're making snap judgments about somebody and trying to figure out how to keep yourself and the people around you safe. It is necessary and useful then to first be able to very quickly understand whether that person or that group has positive or negative intentions towards you. So high warmth meaning more positive intentions, or friendlier, they're well intentioned. Low warmth or being cold being that they have negative intentions towards you. So figuring that out is primary, because if you figure out that that group is well intentioned, then it doesn't matter as much if they're competent to figure out if they are a threat, because you already know that they're not, because they're well intentioned. But if you find out that a group is not well intentioned, well, then you better decide if they are capable of doing something about it and threatening you in some way. So there's some kind of, again, these ideas that come from evolutionary psychology are very difficult to test. They provide, good theoretical ways to derive our predictions, but you can never directly test an evolutionary claim like that. But it does seem to hold up with a lot of good evidence showing that we are faster at making warmth judgments. So we do both of these things very quickly, if not automatically in most situations, but warmth judgments are uniformly faster than competence judgments. So I think it's useful, or I say I think it's useful, but Fiske and other people have shown that this is useful for over a decade now, to think about these things as combined, to think about a 2x2 space of high warmth, high competence, high warmth, low competence, high competence, low warmth, and low warmth, low competence. So different groups in different cultures fit into these different quadrants of the stereotype content model. One useful way to think about it might be to try to generate your own examples of how different people and groups might fit into these spots. One example that comes to mind is taking characters from The Office and kind of placing them in this 2x2 space. So high warmth, high competence, maybe somebody like Pam. High competence, low warmth, somebody that might have bad intentions towards you but is capable of carrying them out. Dwight, somebody who's low warmth, low competence, not really a threat, not really nice to you either necessarily, Meredith. And somebody who's high in warmth, wants the best for you, but is not necessarily capable of, doing the carrying out those intentions, might be Michael Scott. So you kind of see how these things fall out along these different dimensions. Another thing to note might be that frequently we see our in-group members in high competence and high warmth spots. So, Pam tends to be one of the characters in The Office that people are supposed to identify with, so it's no wonder that you might put her in the high competence, high warmth area. But anyway, just so people can get another crack at sort of understanding how these dimensions work and just thinking about them on a different level. Your last writing assignment for this class that has some details on Canvas is going to be applying the stereotype content model to some entertainment or media that you like. So some TV show, movie, book, comic, whatever it happens to be. And find groups or characters more likely in this piece of media and place those characters into the 4 quadrants. So find at least one character that's low competence, low warmth, at least one that's low competence, high warmth, at least one that's high competence, low warmth, and at least one that's high competence, high warmth, and explain why they fit in. And realize that, maybe we haven't seen this show or this whatever it happens to be, so try to be hold our hand through it and tell us everything about these characters and why they fit into these quadrants. So that's always kind of a fun assignment to do, I think. It's also useful, I think, to take a look at some of the groups that Fisk and her colleagues placed along these dimensions. Now I'm going to show these, but keep in mind that the words that they're using to describe people in some cases are a little bit outdated, and these are also some, aggregated data sets in a particular culture at a particular time. So these are not statements about what these groups are actually like. They are just summaries of the perceptions of the people that Fisk and her colleagues happen to measure at a point about 18 to 22 years ago, where they're measuring things across a few different cultural contexts. So kind of like I had before, you have a competence dimension and a warmth dimension. Higher warmth is higher on the y-axis, higher competence higher on, further to the right on the x-axis. And you can see high warmth, high competence groups, tending to be people that, white, generally participants in these studies are going to be associating themselves with and able to see themselves in the same positions as. But when you get to the other groups, things are a little bit different. Like in the high competence, low warmth groups, the high warmth, low competence group, and the low warmth, low competence group. So again, this is one example of how these things were measured with a particular subset of people at a particular time. But hopefully this tells you a little bit about how people are generally perceived. I think it's really important to draw your attention to what we call the ambivalent stereotypes on the in the stereotype content model, showing that stereotypes are not just positive or negative. So these high warmth, high competence groups, those are generally positive, right? Positive on the warmth dimension, positive on the competence dimension. The ones down here in low warmth, low competence, they're low on both. They're negative generally. These other two groups here, though, are a little bit different. They're positive, high on warmth, but low in competence, or positive, high in competence, and low in warmth. These stereotypes are ambivalent, meaning they have, positive and negative attributes to them. These mixed or ambivalent stereotypes do something a little bit different. They elicit different types of reactions from people. Some of them facilitating or helping them, and some of them harming them. Whereas people that are high warmth, high competence, you're generally seeing people that empathize with them, trying to help them all the time, and low warmth, low competence groups being kind of held down. So as we shift to discrimination, I'm going to stop this video here, but then we'll start talking a little bit about how those placements on the stereotype content model tell us something about how people treat other groups and what types of emotions are elicited based on those placements.